Hello, Judge, and hello, my opponent. In this speech, I'll first make a point of clarification, give points on rebuttal, and reaffirm the points made in my constructive. The clarification on small jails. These small jails will serve the function of holding criminals that are waiting to go to court to decide what alternative to prison they will be sentenced with, so that criminals that pose a threat to society are not walking on the streets in the interim. My opponent creates this constructive on the foundation that physical isolation is necessary for rehabilitation and community safety. Physical isolation means to physically cause someone to be alone or apart from others. That foundation in itself is flawed because isolation and confinement is detrimental to rehabilitation. According to the Center of Constitutional Rights, in the early 19th century, the U.S. began imprisoning people in solitary cells as a method of rehabilitation. The results were disastrous as prisoners quickly became severely mentally disturbed. Over a century later, the practice continues, but prisoners are now subjected to solitary confinement in well-lit sterile boxes, and the psychological repercussions are similar. The research demonstrated that prolonged solitary confinement causes persistent and heightened states of anxiety, insomnia, nightmares, irrational anger, and violent fantasies, just to name a few. Therefore, physical isolation does not aid in rehabilitation, and when these inmates are released back into society with these psychological disorders, they may be capable of conducting more harm to society than they were prior to being incarcerated. Furthermore, our Eighth Amendment explicitly goes against cruel and unusual punishment, as this physical isolation clearly is, which is why prison should be abolished. The entire foundation of my opponent's arguments are flawed, and similar to the bad foundation of a house, if prison is not abolished, the house will eventually topple over. This is why the house's alternatives need to be adopted. My first alternative is that drug addiction program should happen, which is mutually exclusive from prisons because it does not have the detrimental effects of physical isolation, and it saves money for the economy since the state does not have to pay for them to be housed in prisons, and it reduces re-imprisonment costs. As opposed to the status quo, having drug treatment programs solely outside of prison has proven to be more beneficial. According to the Drug Treatment Alternative to Prison program, the study showed that the program reduced participants' odds of being rearrested by 56%, and non-participants that were sent to prison were twice as likely to be rearrested. My next alternative was house arrest for the higher level offenders. My opponent attempts to rebut this by bringing up victims of domestic violence reporting less because of this, but that rebuttal holds no weight in this alternative because, as I said before, all violent criminals will be sentenced to boot camp. Boot camp, again, is mutually exclusive from prison because it does not promote physical isolation, which my opponent claims to be the identifying factor in prisons. My opponents claim that prison abolition will result in the state investing more money in harmful forms of policing is unwarranted. Just because directly after the most racially charged period in history, racism continued, does not mean that the same will happen with prison abolition today. I do agree with my opponent that society does have the right to retribution. This will still be done without prison. This does not apply to victims' crimes because, like most jail crimes, because retribution does not solve for anything in them. But boot camps, fines, and house arrest are all forms of retribution and thus have the punishment that my opponent deems necessary to serve as a deterrent. Finally, it seems that both my opponent and I agree on the fact that there are systematic and racial problems in our current government. Because of these problems, I must disagree with my opponent when he claims that prison is a reasonable and reformable mechanism. Prison cannot and will not be properly reformed, so abolition is the only option.